Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be continuing our series, The Unabridged Works of Mencius Moldbug Man, and we're going to do the thread that was the most requested from the comment section of the last video, which is the thread where Moldbug Man takes us through his trip to Sweden. And so without any further ado, let's just get right into it. In honor of Greta Thunberg's odyssey across the Atlantic, I would like to present some notes taken from 2015 when I spent some time in Sweden and concluded it was hell on earth. Not claiming to be an expert on Sweden if there are any errors, these were just my observations. Important point, I was in Sweden during the winter. The winters are obviously brutal in Sweden with about 4 hours of sun and freezing temperatures. If I had visited in the summer, I may have had slightly more positive feelings about the country. I doubt it though. Sweden was cold, dark, and depressing. We were getting about 5 hours of daylight from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. And when I ventured up to the frozen wastes of Lapland, I was getting about 3.5 hours of daylight only. Maybe fun for a winter holiday, but I was there to work.
It's the middle of the day, and this is how high the sun goes up now. It's just a little bit over the horizon, or over the trees.
But winters like this one, when it's been cloudy every day, I actually didn't see a glimpse of the sun for over a month.
It was freezing, though I found the slightly warmer temperatures of Stockholm, -5 roughly, harder to handle than the snowy Lapland temperatures of -25, simply because the cloud cover and the light reflection from the knee-deep snow in Lapland made me feel warmer. Let's state this from the beginning though. It was neither the cold nor the darkness that depressed me during my stay in Sweden. It was Sweden itself that was the killer. First of all, it is ludicrously expensive. I'm not short of $1 or $2, but every time I bought something I genuinely felt like I had been gang raped by a squadron of socialist accountants. Beer, $15 US a glass. 3 stops on the Stockholm Metro, $8. McDonald's meal, $10. You get the idea. Just simple acts like getting on the bus had to be weighed mentally on their costs and whether it was worthwhile or not. Sadly, even simple public transport didn't seem worth it, considering how it was full of inhuman horrors from the world's biggest shitholes.
And for chicken breasts, this is the one that really blew me away because I eat a lot of chicken in my diet. And for 1 kilogram of chicken breast in Sweden, that's going to cost over $12 on average. Over $12 for a kilogram of chicken. And if you compare that to the price in the US, chicken breasts price per kilogram, that's 3.3 to 4 US dollars. So 3 to 4 times the price for chicken in Sweden. To me, that is insane.
The expense of Sweden segues nicely into my next point, as I believe the two are related. I've never met a more depressed or miserable people. Again, I issue my caveat that I believe most of my observations may only be true in winter, but by Odin, the Swedes are a miserable lot. Walk around Stockholm and everyone looks like they're about to kill themselves. Crucially, everyone looks fucking poor. Everybody walks around in the same shabby, slightly worn utilitarian winter clothes of baggy black, brown, and gray. The general impression I got was that there's a deliberate government policy to make everything so expensive that it impoverishes all and brings everybody into a ghastly egalitarian median. Ghastly egalitarianism would be the main feature of my trip. There are no grand displays of wealth and few options to jettison yourself above the likes of even the most prole of basic travelers, even if you're ready to splash the cash. Sweden is a society that seems to really attempt to pull everyone and everything into a gray middle. This means that although you don't see some of the poverty of London or Paris, you also don't get the nice contrasts either. It's kind of hard to summarize, but if you went, you would see it immediately. I guess nobody can demonstrate their wealth when they are paying $15 for a kebab. This ghastly egalitarianism runs deep in their psyches and especially into their woeful customer service. Sweden makes Eastern European customer service look good. Servers seem to think we're all the same, so they treat you like shit because otherwise that would imply you're better than them. This cultural attitude is called Jante's Law and is endemic in Scandinavia. REUPLOAD once wrote extensively about it. Here are some examples of how that plays out. 1. Nearly every request made to someone in customer service is met with do it yourself. In my Stockholm hotel, this reached ridiculous levels. They messed up our booking and had us in for 3 extra nights than we were actually there. Rather than actually address it themselves, they told us to our face to go onto their website and change the booking ourselves manually. They refused to do it even though they were sat at the reception desk 2 inches from my face with the booking system open right in front of them. When we asked if we could use their PC to change the booking, they said no and highlighted that Wi-Fi costs $4 a day. 2. In the same hotel, I left something in the bar. I went to reception to ask if the cleaner had picked it up or if anybody had handed it in. The receptionist told me, you can go back to the bar and look yourself, or you can call the cleaner and ask her if she has it. 3. I know people will question this, but it is true. In some hotels in Sweden, the hotels tell you to put the bed sheets over your bed duvet pillows yourself each day. They don't do it for you. Interesting fact, all bed sheets in Sweden are white, with 0 exception. 4. At check-in at Stockholm Airport, the check-in woman had a rant at me for having the audacity to ask for help checking in. And by help, I simply mean doing her job and checking us in. She kept saying that I should pay to go online, check in manually, weigh the bags myself, print out the tags, and then deposit them at a drop-off. Now, she had the ability to check me in, she just didn't want to do it. She actually said, why should I do something that you can do? Coming from Asia, though I admit it isn't much different in the rest of Europe, there is absolutely nothing to do after 5 p.m., which is when everything closes. These lazy socialist opening hours permeate all of Sweden. The only thing open late are bars. That's if you don't mind spending the price of a New York condo on a pint of beer. Even in the fucking airport, there is nothing open in the evening. Odin help you if you are flying a red-eye flight. That's the basic stuff about Sweden out of the way. However, this all pales into insignificance when you stay there for an extended period and are eventually forced to deal with the absolute worst and vile feature that embodies everything that is wrong with Sweden. I'm talking about washing machines. That's right, washing machines. It is not well known outside of Sweden, but their washing machine culture epitomizes everything wrong with that society. A worthier writer than me, perhaps a Scandinavian Hellbeck, needs to write a drama based around Swedish washing machine practice. It's called the Vaststuga, or laundry room. In socialist Scandinavia, it is unseemly to have something as bourgeois as your own personal washing machine. Stated simply, it's communal laundry facilities in apartment blocks. Most Swedes live in Soviet-style concrete blocks, and the individual apartments are not even set up to allow the installation of individual washing machines. Instead, each complex has a designated washing room which has washing machines and drying facilities. To use the washing machine, you have to sign up for a 1 to 2 hour slot, which typically involves a half-week waiting time. So you can only do your washing during these pre-arranged appointments. Obviously, competition for the top washing spots at the weekend is fierce. People often have to take days off work in order to do their washing because they have not been able to do their washing in the evening or at weekends for months on end. Some people resort to booking slots at 3 a.m. and setting their alarms to wake up on weeknights. You have to physically be in the room to do your wash, otherwise the sensor turns everything off. People have huge arguments when others are late for their slot, do too much washing, don't clean the washing machine afterwards. You're obliged to clean the machine fully after use. The constant battle for slots actually dictates people's lives and schedules. Can you imagine living under such a regime? You'd be considered a dangerous, free-thinking maverick if you bought your own machine or attempted hand washing. You would probably be shot. With all the recent added diversity into Sweden, you can just imagine the fun this creates when you have such a system and one adds some free-thinking immigrants to the usual mix of Swedish NPC clothes washing automatons. When I've told people about the Stalinist clothes washing machine that exists in Sweden, I'm normally met with disbelief. Let me share the statements of others as accompanying proof. I jumped out of bed ready to tackle the day. And by tackle the day, I mean do my laundry. I had scheduled a laundry time for 7 a.m. That's a silly time to do laundry, I know, but I had 0 clean pairs of underwear and 0 clean pairs of socks. Don't judge me. Nothing raises more hackles, shortens more lives, and causes more gnashing of teeth in Sweden than a bleak room filled with washing machines. The Svartsuga is naturally a place of conflict. My favorite, an entire website devoted to passive-aggressive, angry notes left in Swedish laundry rooms. Communal laundry rooms in Sweden stir strong emotions. In Stockholm in 2008, more than 70 cases of laundry-related threats and beatings were recorded. After all that hell involved in washing your clothes, you probably wish to go out, buy some alcohol, and have a nice drink to relieve the stress, right? Easy, right? No. Fuck you. This is Sweden. Alcohol in Sweden is purchased at a brutalist dystopian store that seems like it was taken from Yevgeny Zamyatin's Wii. It's a government monopoly called Systembolaget, or The System for short. A name straight from a Soviet dystopian novel for sure. Sweden's nanny state doesn't think that its population can handle the normal sale of alcohol. Presumably because due to the darkness and everything closing at 5 p.m., the Swedes would just spend their evenings drinking themselves to death with lack of anything else to do. The government strictly regulates the sale of alcohol. All alcohol, with the exception of light beers with an alcohol content of less than 3.5%, can only be sold in one of the state-sponsored off licenses delightfully known as The System. The System is the alcohol store equivalent of America's DMV. These shops make it as difficult as possible to purchase alcohol. A deliberate government policy. You can look all this up. Opening hours are 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. and they don't even open on a Sunday. Hence, you can only really buy alcohol on a Saturday unless you take a day off work, and it shows. There were huge lines of people stood outside The System when I went on Saturday like peasants queuing for potatoes during the final days of the USSR. There are no promotions, no deals, nothing. All alcohol is kept behind glass cases and has a number printed beside it. You then have to remember the number, go to the counter and tell them, for example, I would like a bottle of 1765 and a can of 88427, which they then give you.
Whenever people place beer in the shelf, they're never allowed to put into a six-pack. They have to put a separated. You're allowed to buy 100 if you want to. There's no limitation. But those six-packs here, they actually have to be inside of the box. When you come to the shelves, they're not allowed to put any six-pack because of the psychological effect of six-packs being something that is going to induce you to buy more than you should.
The idea being a six-pack encourages you to drink 6 beers, whereas if they put them out one by one, you're more likely to buy 1 or 2 or however.
Supermarkets and other stores in Sweden are also weirdly socialist and fucked up. You have to do the cashier's work for them. I first discovered this when I went to an Asian supermarket to buy some noodles for self-catering since I couldn't even afford a modest Swedish restaurant. The cashier threw a fit at me for just putting my basket on the checkout conveyor belt and shouted at me to take everything out. At first I thought this was just a crazy autist, but it turns out that there is a set protocol to how you are supposed to behave at a Swedish cashier. You are supposed to take all your items out of the basket and line them up in a neat row on the conveyor belt with the barcodes facing outwards. This is so that the barcodes can scan themselves automatically as they pass the scanner and the cashier doesn't have to touch the items. They then fall into the tray at the end and you pay €5 per plastic bag or some ridiculous near equivalent and bag them up yourself.
The actual cost of these plastic bags at the grocery stores ends up being around 7 crowns on average, at least in my experience shopping around Stockholm. And that comes out to about 84 cents in America, which is pretty high. So I did some calculations and some math here. And let's say I go to the grocery store 3 times a week on average. Or let's say I go to the grocery store 2 times a week and I go to the Swedish liquor store once a week in some cases. But let's just say I buy 3 plastic bags a week on average. Well, I did a little equation here. And if I did 3 times a week times 52 weeks in a year times 7 Swedish crowns, the cost of the actual plastic bag, and then I do this little equation and it came out to 1,092 Swedish crowns in a year. And if I convert that to US dollars, in a single year, I'm spending $131 just on the plastic bags to haul my groceries. And that to me is absolutely mind-blowing.
I asked why the cashiers won't touch the items and was told it is to prevent carpal tunnel syndrome in cashiers if they are forced to perform small repetitive movements all day, like slightly raising bags of peas to a scanner. So for their safety, you have to do the scanning yourself. Fuck it. I mentioned bed sheets in Sweden already, but I need to go back to them. Alongside washing machines, it is the thing that most stands out from my stay in Sweden. I said already that some hotels force you to fit the bed sheets yourself in some janteloven attempt to bring you down to the cleaner's level. Well, it gets worse. Some places make you rent them rather than being included in the room price. I asked why I had to do this and was told it was for female safety. Also, do you know that fitted bed sheets do not exist in Sweden? Really? They don't. Instead, you just have a bed-sized sheet which you lay on top of the mattress, which inevitably falls off during the night. I repeat, there are no fitted bed sheets in Sweden. No non-white bed sheets either, which for a country which prides itself on its increasing diversity is astonishing. Another weird thing is that they don't give you one big duvet for a double bed, but instead give you two single duvets because Swedish couples don't like to share duvets. This is the only thing that kind of made sense to me given the autism of this country. In all places, I never once had darkness in the hotel room. Each room had an annoying floor light which kept the room aglow and couldn't be turned off. I inquired about, and apparently they are standard and for my safety. The TV monitors in 1984 couldn't be turned off either. A lot of the nonsensical things I've mentioned above stem from Sweden's traditionally high-trust homogenous society. However, when you add a whole lot of low-trust immigrants from swarthier countries, things really take a turn for the worse. In keeping with Sweden's policy of impoverishing its citizens, everywhere in Sweden is laughably mean in regards to toilets and Wi-Fi, no doubt due to dusky freeloaders. There is no free Wi-Fi anywhere except the bloody airport, which you'll need when you have nothing to do after 8 p.m. Restaurants and bars are unbelievably cheap, even though you have paid a small fortune for the pleasure of drinking one of their overpriced coffees. You often have to pay extra to get the Wi-Fi password. Same goes for toilets. Public toilets do not exist in Scandinavia. The toilets in malls, stations, etc. cost €2 a go, and restaurants 100% keep toilets locked. If you're a customer, you can ask for the key, but even when you've bought a meal, they sometimes charge extra to use it. Even in McDonald's, you have to pay €1 for a toilet coupon. It's no wonder that such audacity exists in Sweden, though, when you observe the vast bulk of their menfolk. The once proud Viking stock of Europe, now reduced to betas with less testosterone than Greta Thunberg's autistic. In Stockholm, 60% of all children and babies I saw were looked after by men. In one cafe, I saw upwards of 20 men all pushing prams or trying to catch up with friends while wearing Eskimo-style papooses. Their eyes yearned for death. Some of these men were obviously office workers who were still forced to look after their kids while the wife did God knows what, presumably involving a company creche. I rarely saw a woman with a child. It sickened me looking at all these empty, simpering men doing womanly duties. There were exceptions. Remember when I said all the people in Sweden looked poor? The exception was young men in their late teens and early 20s who were abnormally pretty and well-groomed at all times. Freakishly so. Delicately manicured goatee beards, styled hair, moisturized skin, and matching outfits where obvious thought had gone into matching the colors of the shoes, trousers, and shirt. They strutted like effeminate catwalk models down the streets of Stockholm. I can only guess that in feminist Sweden, the roles have been reversed and young men now have to paint themselves and look nice for the dominant females of the reigning clitorati. They reminded me of the beautiful ones from Calhoun's famous 1960s Mouse Utopia experiments. Don't get me wrong, there are some good places in Sweden. There are some lovely old towns, islands, and mountains if the cold and the expense doesn't put you off. A special mention needs to be said about the Vasa Museum, an interesting place, but one where I saw a very Swedish scene. The Vasa Museum is a huge building in Stockholm which houses a 17th century warship, the Vasa, which sank 20 minutes into its maiden voyage and fell beneath the sea. It was later reclaimed, and you can visit the museum to view the well-preserved remains. Here we joined a guided tour where a Swedish woman walked us around the ship and related its history. All was good until she went a bit weird and started getting very emotional about the boat's history. She got a bit teary-eyed and started blabbering a feminist rant which went thus. "One thing I don't like is that people say the boat sinking was a tragedy, but people forget the real tragedy. People died when the boat sank. Those people were men, but everybody forgets they had wives and mothers and daughters back home. These were real women who would have suffered from oppression in the 16th century and who were the real victims of the Vasa. That is the real tragedy, not the men who died, but the women who lived on, taken verbatim from my notes at the time. So according to this deluded feminist cretin, a boat sank, killed loads of men, and the real tragedy was the women sat at home. Right. I wasn't surprised when I later saw in the museum a whole section on women's suffering and the evils of 16th century Europe. Sweden is a sick country. Ever since I spent time there, I studiously avoid any and all types of Swedish influence. Never listen to ABBA, shun meatballs, don't even approach a Volvo. Most importantly, at all costs, keep your distance from IKEA as if your life depended on it. If you have the stomach for it, just look at the architectural aids that is on display at your nearest IKEA or even on its website. IKEA is a cancer cell ready to invade your home and contaminate your family with crisp white death. It's the furnishing of Western decline. Don't believe me? Look at their displays with a critical eye. It's dehumanizing. It's cheap and crap and one of the worst examples of woke capital. IKEA furniture is hamster wheels for a bugman's modern cage. Small homes, live with less. It's depressing modernism. The temporary flimsy nature of your lodgings hammered grimly home every time you cast your weary eye over the ubiquitous uplighter in the corner that stands next to the $8 appropriately named Lack side table. Mixed race couples all over the catalog. Anime everywhere. IKEA reminds you your purpose in life is to pay a boomer's mortgage as you sit bleakly in a sea of pants trying to slot the bottom back into the bedside chest of drawers in your tiny rented apartment. Like a hastily knocked together Billy bookcase, IKEA declares you ultimately interchangeable. Some idiots embrace this. The website will display you images of Fabian and Florian's stylish central Paris apartment, i.e. a tiny gay den situated in a vibrant shithole. Your wife will drool over photos of simpering white-clad homosexuals and their minuscule IKEA-sized palace to shit and blood. Billy bookshelves in the background arranged by book color. Room so small you have to sit on the window ledge looking moody. No wonder then that this country has produced Greta Thunberg. Only a nation as sick and cancerous as Sweden could have spawned such a decrepit, de-individualized autistic shell who merely spouts the buzzwords of her globalist masters and handlers. Want to see hell? Want to see the endgame of what modernity has in store for you? Visit Sweden. Take your wallet. You'll need it. For me, I'll never return to this country of artificial sweeteners. As if to illustrate my point, Sweden's the only country that has the word gatrunka. Loosely translated, gatrunka means to cry while masturbating. It's probably the only activity left in Sweden that isn't banned by the government or doesn't cost a small fortune. Enjoy the decline.